night, y'all. You know what it is. It's Rasati out here in Singapore, and I'm so glad you're joining me here on my Night Owl podcast. As always, you guys, middle of the night, sitting here kind of contemplating the things that I've experienced over the course of the day, the week, whatever, and it just happens to be the main thought for the day, and I want to kind of sit down and hash it out, look at it, turn it over, examine it in my hands, and kind of talk to you about what it is that I'm seeing, what it is that I'm understanding. Maybe it's new, maybe it's not, maybe it's my own thing that I want to share with you guys, and I'm hoping that this gives you another perspective to consider just in general for your lives. So today I was going back through a couple of the memories that popped up in Facebook, and I realized that I had a really big question that I needed to kind of think on a little bit longer. So I wanted to do that here on the podcast, and I'm hoping you'll bear with me. But the content basically boils down to the idea of what is equal. Like, what is equal? And I was really thinking about, well, if something is equal, how is it equal? What are you comparing it based on? And if you look at it scientifically, right, you have very, very real, quantifiable things that you can use to compare two separate, I don't know, entities, quantities, things. You could compare two things based on some really quantifiable ideas like the color, the size, the shape, the volume, the height, the width, the breadth, like all of that, right? That is quantifiable. That's something you can actually really sit down and like measure and see, and then see if they're the same or not. But when it comes to two human beings, how you do that? That's what I want to know. So if you do not believe the same thing that I do, right, then obviously we're not the same. And that's okay. But when did that begin to mean that because we're not the same, you're less than me because you're not like me? That's the part I wanted to get at, because I get the impression that a lot of times when we're in relationships, when we're speaking to people, when we're teaching people, when we're learning from people, when we are mentored or in close proximity to people, that the minute we find out that they don't believe something that we do, somehow or another we feel like we got one up on them. Like we know something you don't know, and because you don't know it, you're not the same as me, and if you're not the same as me, then you must be less than I am, because I'm great the way I am. In that moment, we feel really good about ourselves. But for some reason, we do this comparison and I don't like it. I was brought up ecumenical, which means that I believe that everyone's point of view is valid, which means that all the religions are valid, that all the ways that we could pray, valid, and the ways that we can go to a temple and pay homage or sit in quiet contemplation or any one of 1,000 things, all of that is valid, because for me, the way we communicate with God or consciousness or the universe or a source, whatever you want to call it, is okay. And however you want to call it is okay. And the way you communicate with that spiritual entity is okay, because that is a very personal, private thing. And the same goes for your beliefs. I believe that what you believe is fine. If this is the way you believe that you should run a household, perfect. And if it works, even better. But sometimes the things we believe aren't the best for us and they don't really work, but it was passed down from somebody else. And we don't know if we're allowed to like chuck it and try again, or if we have to carry this burden on our shoulders and still make our lives fit into that idea. But more than that, I see it. I see it in groups. I see it in like a community collective almost, that you frown down upon people that aren't doing what you think is the right thing to do, or aren't speaking the way you think they should, or aren't behaving the way you think they should, and then you think that they are less than you. When I came back home as a divorcee, suddenly I was damaged goods. Suddenly I was less than everybody else. I had so much potential, and then I married this guy, and I came home with a baby on my hip, and you know what? Yeah, she's not that great anymore. But if you hear them talk to you, they're like, oh my God, she's amazing. Like, I don't know how you got out of that situation. That's really, really brave of you. But come talk about, if she's going to get married again, and she can't do this by herself because she has to have a husband. That's not appropriate. You're not supposed to do it as a single female. But she is brave. But you can't marry my child. My child's never been married. Don't you, taint their reputation because you're a divorcee and they aren't. You have to be with your people. Like, it's weird. I don't get it. And then, of course, religion, right? You have people who are very, very devout in their religious beliefs, and they have a specific way of how to do things. And anyone who does not see or do things that specific way Yeah, they're heathens. They're not really that great. They're going to hell anyway to be all right. You know, y'all just stay over there. Don't come over here and infect me with all of your great big beliefs, these liberal ideas. Like, we can get into politics too. It could be anything. It could be um, fashionistas, right? Who have a very specific idea of what fashion should be, and anything that does not fit in those parameters, if they really are strict and, you know, focused on what their idea of fashion is, they don't have space for anything that contradicts that or, you know, brings that into question. And that's, I think, the part of the reason that people tend to look down on anyone that isn't the same as themselves. I will put it to you like this. For a long time, in the US, right, we don't have this habit of hiring someone to work in our house. You have to be super, super rich to be able to do all that, right? But in Singapore, it is the norm. Everyone has a helper. Everyone has someone who stays in their house and cooks and cleans and does all the unwanted stuff for them because they can. And it's the best way, apparently, to raise your children. But I don't come from Singapore. I was born here. I was not raised here. So I've lived in 4 other countries, right, where we don't have house helpers who live in the house. We do things ourselves, and our children watch us slog through and do the housework and the cooking and all of that stuff. So they know that they got to manage all this at some point. This is coming for them, you know, and so they are under no pretense about what it is to adult. In Singapore, however, it is the norm, and that's the culture. That's fine. I'm not knocking it. If this is the best way for you to do things, perfect. But that is not my belief. My belief is I am very, very aware of what my children watch, and it's the reason I left my husband in the first place, because they were watching us fight all the time, thinking that that was normal, and I wasn't having any of that. I grew up in a space where my parents fought, and my parents fought us, and we thought that was normal. The abuse, the you know, the beating, the yelling, the screaming, the judgment, like all of that. We thought that was normal. You see our generation like really struggling right now with raising our own families and trying to get through, like, you know, pretending we're not in counseling where we are, all of that. Okay. So I saw all of that. I was very aware, and I did not want that for my kids. So the norm here, having extra help in the house. Perfect. That's great. When we were growing up, you know, we had our grandparents do that stuff, but y'all want a maid to do that? That's perfect. Y'all do that. When I decided I did not want a maid, my uncles came in. They were like, "Nah, you can't do it without a maid, and you're not about to put all this on your mom. That's not fair to her. You know, you need to raise your kids." And I'm thinking, oh, okay, I understand that, but I also come from a family where my grandparents, my literal, like your parents, my uncles, right? Your parents raised me because my parents were in a different country. And at the time, apparently that was appropriate and okay, right? And I would rather my grandparent raise my child, or the grandparent raise the child, rather than a random outsider who isn't even from this country, damn sure not related to us, does not have the same language capacity, the same culture, the same religion, none of that. Complete stranger living in my house, first of all, living in my house. Second of all, taking care of my kid when I'm not there. Which means they don't know how I was raised. They don't know how I want to raise my child. They're not about to ask those questions either. They're just going to do their work the best way they know how, right? And I have to be okay with that. And eventually I found out that my maid had been leaving my child at the playground by herself. Baby girl was like maybe 5 at the time. And I was, oh my God, when I tell you I bugged out when baby girl told me that she had to go to the bathroom one day and she couldn't because she was outside and the maid was not with her. So she peed in a corner outside by the HDB blocks. I was like, nope, nope, this is not happening no more. I'm getting rid of the maid. So when I made that decision all by myself entirely after I'd been pressured into hiring a maid in the first place. Okay. And after that, I was afraid to tell anybody. And so I did not. I did not want anyone else to know that this is not what I was doing. But I also realized that every time we had a conversation, they would ask about how the maid was doing. And I didn't have anything to say anymore because I didn't have a maid. So eventually the truth came out and I told them, and they were like, oh, you can't do it without a maid. You can't, you can't ask us to help. You better figure it out. Fine, I figured it out. Put her in daycare. Not my first choice, but I did it. And eventually I started showing the world that I could cook because I used to post cooking videos, and I could do her hair because it takes me 6 hours every weekend, and I'd post it every weekend, and that we could have fun, and I could actually spend time with my kid and raise her, and she would actually know that I was capable of running a house just like one day she's going to have to be. But even then, I had plenty of people who were in opposition to that idea and thought that they would look down their nose at me, thinking that I wasn't making enough money to be able to afford one. So then I was less than they were. And that, having a maid was a privilege, and here you are like unprivileged. Yeah, we don't associate with people like that. And I really got that impression that they thought that I was less than they were. But when I thought about it, I also realized that if I start posting all the stuff that I'm capable of doing, they would see it as I'm bragging that I can't, and they would see it as an insult to them, saying that I'm bragging I can and you can't. I could see that happening too. So on that note, I realized, okay, I see the insult there. I was not intentionally insulting you guys. I was proud of the work that I was doing, and I was happy that I was, adventuring into new recipes and, cooking in bulk and trying to figure out how to manage my resources and to raise my child. So I was proud of myself and happy, and not everyone took it that way. A lot of people took it right on the nose, like I had intentionally thrown my lifestyle in their face, showing them that y'all think that you have to do this, you don't. I'm proving to you that I can, and if you can't, then you're less than I am. That's not the intention at all. But I see that people take it that way. I think this was covered in another episode where I was talking about how ego is your number one adversary. But to be honest, just because someone does it different doesn't mean they're better or worse than you are. Yeah, okay, when you're jealous and you're envious of the way people do things or the way people are, part of you is admitting that you like this aspect of their life and you're mad that you don't have that aspect of their life. Now, you could level up and try to get there, or you could train yourself to get there, or you could let it go entirely and realize that there's something that you have that they don't, and that's okay. So now you're non-comparable. Does that make sense? There is nothing about me that can be compared to you. I know we grew up with our aunts and uncles, comparing their kids to us, and our parents comparing us to our cousins. Like, all that shit happened. I know. Oh, your cousins get married. How come you ain't getting married yet? How come you haven't got kids yet? How come you haven't got your house? I get it. But everyone's path is their own, and everyone's journey is full of enough turmoil internally that we don't really need any extra help outside. So, I want to know, how do you define equal? How do you even begin to compare what I've been through versus what you've been through? We have people talking about trauma, and people get offended when you say big T trauma and little t trauma, like all trauma is equal. It's not. Not all trauma is equal. People have been through some crazy situations, things that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy that actually have happened in real life. Like, I couldn't even begin to imagine a scenario like that, but it happened. It's been there. It's like people have done this to each other. And then there are people who have had a really tough time with stress management, and that comes out as trauma for them as well. And I'm not saying it's not traumatic. I'm not at all. But there is a difference. There is a very big difference between rape victims at a very young age, like children who are being raped, versus children who are succumbing to the pressures of a society where it's either do or die, and if you don't have the grades to prove that you can get into, a secondary school that's reputable, that you can't get into a college program that is reputable, that you're going to bring down your entire family's reputation down with you, and then you feel like, oh my God, I can't get the help I need. I'm not understanding what the hell is going on, and I don't have anyone to ask for help. So you know what? I'm just going to end it all right here. I get it. Your cross is your own to bear. Your cross is big to you. That is true. But that doesn't mean you can compare anything at all. People take things differently. People have different thresholds for pain. People have different views on what things mean. So there's never, never a way to compare any of those things. So for you to ever pass judgment and feel like someone is less off than you are or better off than you are, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because you would never want anyone to do that to you. Why in the hell would you do it to anyone else? So once again, the question being, what is equal? How do you define that? At what point do you decide that because someone doesn't believe the same things you do or doesn't do things the same way you do, that they are less than you are, or that they're better than you are? It's not for you to decide. It's not any of your business. I would rather you focus on what's the best way for you to move forward. And if you're going to ask people for advice, understand that they're coming at it from a very different point of view, a very different background, and they can give you what worked for them. And then it's up to you whether it's possible to adapt it to your life or not. And it's okay if it doesn't. You just keep searching for another solution. But please, don't pass judgment. Don't decide, judge, jury, and executioner that someone's less than you are and then go treat them some kind of way. Because I'm telling you, you would be hurt if it happened to you. So please, get this idea of equal out of your head. Now, if it's quantifiable, certainly. Women's rights to vote versus men's rights to vote. That is a human's right to vote. Whether it's transgender versus straight people. Nope, you all have the same rights. You are all human type creatures, and you all have the right to safety and security and the ability to make money and the ability to speak up and speak your mind and to marry whoever the hell you want, because love is free, you guys. So on some notes, when it's quantifiable, it is a universal equality. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to compare. I don't know how you're going to compare. Our blood types are different. Our weight is different. Our bone structure is different. Our bone density is different. The way our hair looks, the color of our hair, the color of our eyes, our bone structure, our base temperature, like all... There's too much to try and compare for us to ever be equal. And so for us to just be individuals, I think that's enough to consider, don't you? I don't know. That's my 2 cents worth. I love you guys. I'll catch you again soon. Bye.